We'll get started. It is 31. It is a 500 block train sitting right here. That's London's, yeah. Catherine is former Lake Forest resident and a long-term member of the community, and she recently relocated to Montana. So we're delighted that she has returned to share her journey as writer and introduce her latest work. Since publishing her debut novel in 2013, Catherine has written 13 books, many of them award winners and national bestsellers. That is more than a book a year, an impressive accomplishment by any measure. Catherine is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Northwestern University, where she also earned a master's degree in marketing. Before becoming a published author, she built a successful career in marketing with Procter & Gamble and Sears Roebuck, and later worked in development at the Field Museum and the University of Chicago. Her writing career began in 2009 during recovery from surgery, immersing herself in melodic classics from Jane Austen to the Bronte sisters. She found inspiration and soon created Samantha Moore, protagonist of her first novel, Dear Mr. Knight. Though writing came naturally, the path to publication wasn't easy. After being rejected by 31 agents, Catherine finally connected with the right one who sold her manuscript to HarperCollins, launched her literary career. Today, HarperCollins remains her publisher, though her storytelling has evolved over the years. Her first two novels are infused with themes and characters from classic literature. More recently, she's turned historical fiction in her newest novel, the English masterpiece, just released this month. It's a thrilling mystery set in the art world of 1970s London, which I guess is historical. It follows a young state gathering Karen, who is accused of forging a Picasso and was forced to clear her name while uncovering her painting's true origins. It's a gripping page turner that also delves into the nature of artistic genius. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Katherine Reay. Okay, I'm sad. Annie knows more about me than I completely accurate. Like amazing. But once my lifetime program, I've been able to Sears. So real quick, when I joined Sears, I was part of an marketing team that was trying to figure out how to use. I'm sorry. The that was trying to figure out how to use the most robust database in the world because the big just closed. Now, if you think about it, that's laughable today when we think about Google, Facebook, Meta, that 55 million person database was the best in the world. That was, shows how things have changed in 30 plus years. So today I'm going to speak to you a little bit about and forgers. I was scheduled to come speak about the Berlin letters a year ago, but that was too strong. And I simply said, let's postpone it a little more and get a double hit. Chance and forgers with the English masterpiece releases in last week. But we will begin with the Berlin letters. Is a great spy novel. It is about a young CIA cryptographer, Louise Vogler, and she discovers a series of letters in her home that reveals that not only was her grandfather sick, but her father, who she had long presumed dead, is actually still alive, living in East Germany and languishing in a Stasi prison. So of course she does the only thing what we all do. She impetuously hops on a plane with the idea of breaking him out. And this novel takes place within a 1 week time period, the final week of the Berlin Wall, leading up to November 1989. But didn't start there. It started with this series of photographs, along with the previous novel, the one that came before, The Shadow in Moscow. In A Shadow in Moscow, I have two women spies circling each other in Cold War Moscow. One works for MI6, the other works for the CIA. Their war tensions started to alter change, hence his first list in June of 1985 to the KGB and broke their lives. And most like peaceful war gets a single line in that one. I think one of the spies says, East Berlin put up a wall today. And it struck me that something so massive and had such an impact upon the world got only a line. So I wondered what it would be like to write a novel in which the whole plays both the structure of the novel, meaning that it begins on August 13, 1961, day the wall goes up, and it ends February 1989, the night the wall falls. Brings out a character within the novel, imposing upon the characters, etc., for the next 28 years. And it started with this moment. The identity of this family has never been known, but it is that first morning, because that first morning, that wall is only foiled barbed wire. And you can see the wife passing her child to her husband. He is on the west side, she is on the east. And if you divided family that morning, you weren't divided for 28 years. In fact, the next time she could have hugged her son or her husband would have been for one day, 2.5 years later, because that was the first time East Germany allowed West Berliners a one-day pass to come to the city to see family. So that's what started the story, and that's what starts Louisa Vogler's journey. I imagined her as one of those children, having very few, but if you worked barbed wire that first morning and wanted to use your tail. But just like any story, nothing begins, especially in the novel, when it begins. So come on, first, and we're going to have to read the quote. Let's not forget what Berlin was during the Cold War. Here's the test of us. When I'm on the west extreme, our streets are brilliant. Now, 80 to 60 years later, I think we forget that a little bit. Nikita Khrushchev said it very well, because that is how we used Berlin. Berlin was this epicenter of the Cold War. It was the crucible through which the West and the East sort of battled things out. And so it made it a very interesting flagrant set of story with all these tensions. Didn't begin, obviously, in 1961 with the wall. For my purposes, I say it began in 1945, at the end of World War II. Now, the Yalta Conference, Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt divided up Germany, and they actually allowed Stalin to come into his portion first. He arrived at fully secured East Germany by July of 45. The Western Allies did not come west until the fall, November and December 45. And they did that partially as a concession to them, because the Battle of Stalingrad was and is the fiercest battle in history, with the highest casualty rate ever. 1.9 million died in that battle alone. But what happened when someone came through? Two things. Number one, he wanted to go and stay. He was furious. He was trade up. Remember, they were always yeah, the more testimony about Stalingrad that was today. So he came through, rampaging through East Germany,
and shipping back all emissions into Russia. So he decimated the economy from moment one. But he was not allowed to barricade like he did the border of Germany. He was not allowed to barricade his Berlin. By the terms of the Yalta Agreement, that city was to have free movement between all four sectors. And until 1961 it did. But what that meant was our East German population came into Berlin, walked across the street into the western sector, and was gone. So the already suffering economy was failing. So Walter Ulbricht, Eastern state, wanted a wall desperately. He wanted to stop that flood of immigration from the country. And so Khrushchev would replace Stalin by that time, and he finally got the yes. He did put that wall up within one night. Operation Rose began at about 10 p.m. on August 12th, and it was completed with 13,000 troops flooding the city, completed by 6 a.m. the next morning. As I said, if you happen to be at Omaha having dinner on the western side away from your wife and children, you were then separated for 28 years. And so that is how that story sort of came to be and began. But here's the research, as someone will sit over here, it involves travel. So I thought we get to Berlin, we have Stockholm City, which like Lisa does. And so I got to checkpoint Charlie. I, of course, had to stay next to a Trabi, which is the only car you could buy in East Germany at the time. Got to stand at the Brandenburg Gate, which of course was in the death zone during those 28 years. You can see a picture of a wall as you knew it in '89. That, of course, not standing in any form now, maybe one block of it at the Wall Museum. But that's actually the fourth iteration of the wall. As I said, the wall began as barbed wire that first night. However, Ulbricht had been prefabricating cement blocks outside the city so nobody would know. And within days, he started building the physical wall. The final wall was started in 1978. It was completed in 1981. And it was that massive 10-foot structure with its piping, with the metal yards for the box burn, with also the fan, automatic firing weapons, and a sixth wall on the eastern side. In a way, I'll admit, I always could have imagined it as being just a one wall. But if you went to the eastern side, it was quite a fortress. In that final 10-foot wall. So that is a little bit about the Berlin letters. At the end, if you have any questions about it, I tell you, I loved writing that story. The highlight, I will say, was spending an afternoon with an East Berlin history professor. And I don't know if you'll know this, you probably do, I didn't. But when you sign for an Airbnb, there's something called Airbnb excursions. And my husband bought a tour with an East German history professor, so it would just be me. And I got to spend the afternoon with him, learning details about East Germany and about that time that I could not get from my reading. And I tell you, I've read so much. But I would not have known, because no book really discussed it, that when the Soviets came in, say, they took only external ornamentation off the buildings. So that right off the street called Beletage, the first corner of the street, so not so high that you got the city heat, but the dust, often had higher ceilings and had supporting finister outside. They moved to be equal, so it's all that way. That's didn't really understand that the Soviets built their buildings sort of skewed to the street to keep that central street life from happening. They did not want that sort of street-like community to be, which, again, I would not have intuitively realized. And there's another lesson that was interesting. In East Germany, a lot of the buildings that were bombed, not only by the Allies, when Stalin came through, he destroyed much of Berlin as well. A lot of those buildings in the East remain just sort of rubble away, but even to today remain. And you can look up 5th and 6th stories and see doors. In the book, I call them doors to nowhere, because it looks like you could walk through them into building. And very much open on the other side, they are bricked up. But from the inside, Just looks like it could open all frame. So fascinating to spend my time there to race through the city much as Louisa does, and it's a little bit of Berlin letters. When I was finished with that story, I'm looking for my next song, because I really decided that I was to write about it because it's so small. And if death is on the line, then you've got high stakes. And that just feels like a good, fun, easy writer. We're past my desk for my masterpiece, Wolfgang Beltracci. So Beltracci was released from prison in 2015 and he amassed about $1 million, 40 years of forging post-impressionist paintings. Most um, what is actually doing now? Found that kind of interesting. And I read and listened to a documentary about him. And it was this moment that I got hooked on the idea of forgers. He turns to the camera and he said, "Why are my paintings as valuable as furniture? Come along. They are as beautiful. They are more beautiful." I was like, okay, that's some arrogance there. This is getting interesting. So then starting to dig into forgers. Because there is, in a way, they're very much like somethings. You're playing with this line between illusion and reality. You have this simplicity about you. You are really presenting a art. One of the most famous, Conrad Abraham, is considered a perfect forger. He mostly centered on Johann Vermeer during World War II time, and his top client actually was from Goring, the Nazis. And when the war was, he was put on trial in the Netherlands for selling national masterpieces to the Nazis. And he was proven in court and he plea that he was not a criminal but a national hero, that he'd been thinking all along and they were all forgeries. So Gandhi did go to jail, but he wasn't right. He was sort of deemed a national hero from that point. But he's still up paying us 30 million. His fortune. But here, three more I found interesting. This is the only forger I came across who went from the dark side to the light. Did you know that Michelangelo started as a forger? So he began his career forging Greek statuary. And he sold one to a dealer who then sold it to I think it's Cardinal Reay. Probably mispronouncing his name. The cardinal realized the sleeping heiress was a fake, vented his wrath upon the dealer, then sought out Michelangelo and commissioned him to create original works. And that is how Michelangelo went to place the instrument creating his own stuff. But here is Elmer de Reay, who first and foremost was a con man. And I say that because although he was the only classically trained artist I came across, he began his career in forgery. In the 1920s and 30s, he was arrested to 5 different European cities, 10 convictions for forgery, false identity, check forgery, all sorts of mayhem was created across Europe. When he came out of World War II, he turned his attention to art. This piece, if you read, is one continual un salad Henri Matisse, because that's what forgers do. They don't paint a painting we know. For instance, they sometimes do. The Mona Lisa was taken from the Louvre in 1911. There is still debate today whether the Mona Lisa actually was returned when the painting came back in 1913. But that's a named painting. You can paint a painting in style, and then you create a progress the exact number. It was lost by the Nazis here. It was hidden for a few years there. And so you have created a painting that fits in Matisse's Louvre, but it's not one that anyone can recognize. In fact, Reay did that so many times with Modigliani that now a comprehensive catalog, a definitive catalog of Modigliani's work can be made. However, his archive is tainted because there absolutely are lots of devorees within his work. Another really messed up the world And by the way, experts do say, walk into a major museum today, you are seeing 20 to 40% forestry. I mean, that's so sad. But another major player, these two, John Hyatt was the forger, John Drew was the con man. He painted about 200 paintings, and they sold those paintings to Sotheby's, Christie's, major art museums, high-level patrons in the 1980s and 90s. And when they went to trial in the 1990s, only 60 were found. That means 140 are still out there, sort of in play, messing up the world's historical archives. So I found all this very interesting. So I decided, okay, I'm going to have a forgery paper. So I did my research both in reading and in movies. And by the way, there's some very fun forgery paper movies. If you haven't seen, I think it's 63, How to Steal a Million with Audrey Hepburn. Promising Delight. And of course, there's the 1999 Thomas Spring Fair. So both of those come into play in quite a bit. But you did an artist of forge. So how did he Pablo Picasso? You had to be him for a few reasons. When we say today, Renoir, Monet, Gauguin, Picasso, I think we forget what he was. In the mid to mid 19th century, he was almost a forced rock star, cult popular artist, which we realize he's also and remains to be the world's most forged artist. And I think it's partly because his art spans 5 movements within art, and he have their favorites. So if you span 5 movements, you're going to get 5 times the forgers inside. Fine. So he became my artist. We've got a few themes here that you'll read about in the book. The old guitarist, lovely names. This is a nude woman in large red poncho, very original. Like the head of Nora Muller. On the right, you see a fledgling artist interpretation of the forgery on life in the book, Woman Hungry. I mentioned my artist daughter to forge Picasso, and I think she got intimidated because it's titled Woman Laughing, but she has no face. So I don't think my daughter's going to try to sell it all by I don't think she's quite reached it. She said, I'm never finished. But anyway, so I think the beginnings of Woman Laughing. When I needed to place the story somewhere, and I came up with a few fun. It's not next, is it in here at all? There's a really fun point, 2 fun things about Picasso that centered this story in the Tate Gallery in London. Number one, I knew London very well. I've lived there a few years in the early 2000s, love the city, have set books there, know how to move my characters around there. But in 1960, Picasso had an exhibition at the Tate that is considered the world's first blockbuster exhibition. And in fact, the word was used to describe it. And that was one of the very first times, possibly the first, that the word blockbuster, which came about in World War II as a military term, was used outside the military. I found that fascinating. Of course, the video stores didn't come around until the 1980s, 1989 actually, but that was the first time that that word was used. Additionally, in 1971, that was some picture I had, the director of the Tate wanted to honor Picasso's 90th birthday. So he invited 89 school children to the front steps of the gallery, and he held the 90th. All 89 children were getting a dove, and they're all kind of squeezing in tight. And then when the feast was ready, to release their doves. Let's say some doves got squeezed a little too tight, kid got some sued. It's a great picture, just birds everywhere. It was both in honor of his birthday and in honor of his painting Charlie the Dove. So Kate had a long history with Picasso. And when he died on April 8th, 1973, the was right in honor of himself. And so that is the limits of this story. Down the building is the curator of our collections, Louis history assistant, and they are within 2 weeks' time putting together a world-class exhibition for Picasso. And so for then, I had to go to London to research that. And I thought, what's really fascinating is that London was experiencing a war in 1973, not unlike our own. Remember, said 1973 was the most pivotal year in UK history. I found that really interesting because this is a country that was standing solo against Hitler in World War II for a while, survived the Blitz, but 1973 was the year. But it turns out that several things happened that year. Number one, it was the year that the Trumps came to British soil. It was the first bombings in Britain, starting on March 3rd, the Old Bailey bombings, but then there were three other bombings that year alone. Additionally, they were involved in the Yom Kippur Wars in the Middle East. They were under an energy crisis. They were having coal strikes, labor union strikes along all sectors. The government instituted a 3-day war week to save energy costs, and they were suffering from rampant inflation and a recession. So it's the sort of crucible that brings these characters into that moment of, say, living pay to paycheck, which you'll find Lily does. So, yeah, with her job. But it didn't feel too unlike what we're living through now, in the sense that I read the newspaper, it feels a little bit like a crucible. It added tension to the story, which obviously every story needs, but also that's a reflection of life. When I was a teen, I also made plus of a secondary period, although it received both permission and the beginnings of funding for the huge expansion. If you visit the paper today, huge expansion, that was put on the table until back on until the late 1970s, although it was approved in 68. So the paint gallery that Lily would have walked around was not the site that it is today. So I went to the archives to research exactly what exhibits there at that time was, what it felt like, what was accessible, what wasn't accessible. Ton of fun there. Then I also visited, you'll see at the right, a little obscure building in Reay. That was London's most famous school, St. Martin's School of Art. It also had the world famous sculpture school. Around the world, that was the place for the most cutting edge sculpture. Now it's a spoiled bookstore, which I'll admit I like even better. But I wandered around there to see what that looked like in 1973. And it's actually just a big fun cameo. I never put super real names in a book. As I said, the Thomas Mann era, I wanted to steal a scene from that movie because it was so much fun. Then I discovered that a certain actor from that movie actually attended St. Martin's School of Art for 1 year, the exact year Lily was there. So they were friends. So we had to get a shout out. And now my agent is trying to get him a copy of the book. But anyway, when you're ready, you can find out who that Reay German might be. My last bit of research was spending a morning with the chairman of Orchid Species of the Housing Insurance Group. And that was fascinating. So you have the part of the Lloyd's syndicate. So it's two pictures of Lloyd's up there on the right. If you've never been into London and seen the Lloyd's London building, it is fascinating. My gosh, I should have asked her what it was told. All the things from the outside. London is an absolutely incredible looking building. I learned a lot about insurance. Lloyd's began in 1600 as an coffee attempts, with people basically betting on what ships would and would not come back with their cargo. In the 1970s, however, art was still classified as a marine cargo. It did not have its own insurance designation, which has implications for how we think about it and how I think about it in the story. Did not get its own designation until the 1980s, when the global recession lifted, money flooded back into the market, and people were looking at art now as investment. And that has changed the valuations in the 80s. The way we think about art now is in ways that consequence insurance and even about the 1970s, which to me was sort of a fascinating nuance of perspective. So that definitely goes through the book. And I was a insurance investigator because I'll note it's mostly professional at the time they did exist. If any time you come to line somebody wants to investigate. So you'll make that's pretty well. So it is, as I said, it's art literary paper. It's a little lighter than my novels. But it was so much fun to kind of wrap myself in that whole art in that time period and watch poor Lily Summers try to get her out being blamed for so there've been a lot of questions as to why I'm not present the Lake Forest resident. Well, last summer, our good friend and realtor suggested, because I had said we wanted to downsize, suggested it was the perfect time to do so. The market was a good place for it. And she advised, we took her advice. However, it sold very quickly, which was fabulous, and we weren't sure where to go. We looked at some local rental properties, but then we had to disclose that we had that east in the middle. That's 150-pound Great Dane painter. And he's still up and he's my aunt, see from the right, actually only dog on my own. When he arrived, I just he was going to love me best. And so that meant I needed to love him best. So I did all the training, I did everything. You know, Duke is very loyal to me, like. So we get out to Montana, however, and a few more dogs join the show. So Dash, over here to the left, English Cocker Spaniel, Thea joined her in November. Actually, old lady over here, and she has seen recently Tiny Little Fitz, another English Cocker, joined us, and we're training him for our dog. And we will ship him off to her in October. So quite honestly, until this crew gets called down a little, I think we are stuck in Montana with a little more land to run these things wild. I will tell you, just as a funny story, Thea, this is right here, 9 months old, and she runs very fast, which is very good because a coyote was chasing her last week, and she was faster than a coyote of evidence. We had a GPS collar just to kind of keep track. And the color is Fee, and they have prissy dogs all around. Within 1 month time, Thea is now the #1 Cocker Spaniel in the world and the #1 dog in Montana because she takes about 30,000 to 100 steps a day. She's a very good girl. So that is a little about life phenomena. And then here are the previous books. Obviously, the Berlin Letters is not there, nor is the masterpiece that I've spoken about, but these are the previous ones. And if you have any questions about those, I promise you know them as well as the two I'm going to discuss today. This is absolutely your time, so if you have any questions, I'm all yours. Thank you so much.
Here's my question. How do you come up with the ideas? And do you have a drawer at home where you tuck them away into the drawer? And then the second is book a year at an incredible pace. Tell us a little bit about the process. You get an idea, you do an outline. How does the book get created? When do you actually sit down and start pounding out pages?
Two good questions. Okay, the first is, think about it, like, where do I get the idea? Yeah, it's from very different places. For instance, when I wrote, which I mentioned, the previous novel was about the SOE, the early days of spy novel, World War II. And one day I just wondered, what USOE spy would do next? And so I looked at what Virginia Hall did next, one of the most famous American spy over in Britain and in France. She went back to the United States and she worked for the CIA. So then I was like, oh, what if women work for the CIA? So I went down a rabbit hole of women during the Cold War. And that's how Shelley Moscow came about. And to be honest, the Berlin Letter simply came about when Ingrid said, he's Berlin fucking wall today. It's like, that is the biggest symbol, and you're giving it one line. And so it's retreating and expanding that. That said, I do not like tools in the drawer. So when a novel I get panicked each and every time that a good idea will never come to me again. So when the Berlin Letters ended, I was sure I was going to do another spy story. But then Beltranchi came across my desk, and his arrogance, his hubris, and that is something spies also have. To believe that you can calm the world, you have to carry a certain amount of hubris and duplicity within you.
spades. And I'm like, hey, you're interested? And you might be a little lighter. I have a friend too. I don't know if y'all know Annabelle Moynihan. She just hit the New York Times bestseller list with It's a Love Story. She keeps sending me texts. The light side is more fun. Oh, where's the light side? So I told her, I'm doing that portrait paper. I'm getting lighter. So I just thought it would be fun. Now, I am writing my next I have been asked what's after that. I have no idea. There will be a moment of panic, and hopefully an idea will come again. It seems to keep coming. I should say that the one book a year and a half is pretty intense, and I'm beginning to think in my mid to late 50s I might take a break. So I'm going to spend it to 2 years and some more time to do. Mhm. Yes, yes. The London House is my first historical fiction, and it came about because I really wanted to explore the idea of memory and backstory in real time. It is about a secret that shadows a family for 80 years from the early days of World War II. What is that secret? And if you find out that secret, what will that mean today? But I didn't want character to interview people and to sort of have that smokiness of memory, lies, secrets in that 80 years. So I presented that early time in World War II, which has Elsa Schiaparelli's fashion, which has the beginnings of the SOE through diary entries, and letters. So you as the reader will meet Margaret and Caroline Waite, the Waite girls from the interwar years to the early days of World War II, to Elsa Schiaparelli's sons making dresses for Wallace Simpson, all that fun stuff. And then 80 years later, you will see the results one night, what it has meant for this family, and what it might mean when Caroline came to discover the truth about her grandmother and her great aunt 80 years later. So it is a dynamic story. I absolutely love that story. And one fun thing, if you've ever seen Schiaparelli's designs, the modernist Italian designer who was really, we don't hear about Coco Chanel in the 1940s. Schiaparelli was a little bit cut out. And Salvador Dali, if you've ever seen Wallace Simpson's trousseau when she married the newly abdicated King Edward VIII, the lobster dress was designed by Salvador Dali. Schiaparelli did the dress, he did the lobster, and they had a lot of creative collaborations during that time. So it's good fun to research on it too. That's a little bit about London House. Yeah, anything else? Yes.
I can say that I've read every single one. They are all that.
She said everyone I was asked about. Yes.
River gateway to go to.
So the main place I go first is the library. I take every book I can get. And the reason I do that is it was very important for both the Berlin letters and the Shadow in the Sky. I wanted books published prior to 1985 because post the USSR breaking up in 91, everything changed. Street names, city names, the way people think. So I needed prior to Alder James 85. And in fact, even in Berlin, I wanted books prior to 1989. I did not want the history of the reunification in anyone's thought, even in a book. So I got the library first. And then, yes, I do as many primary sources as I can. For the Soviet Union book, I was able to interview 3 women who immigrated to the US in the early mid-1990s, early 2000s about their childhoods. In the Germany book, I was able to spend an afternoon with a history professor who really helped. So definitely primary sources. I don't write back to your question. I write in hard until I feel and understand the soup of the time. And that is when I start to write. When I believe I can walk that street and feel what they feel, smell what they smell, and then I begin to write. Research always continues, but then I know enough to put my feet on the ground and begin.
We're talking about the back as vehicles.
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question because it's a surprisingly bad answer. Number one, I try to recover. Because in fact, that meant a 750-year history of Berlin. Fascinating city, always in conflict, by the way. But I try to recover because you never know what you're going to find. In fact, there's a great moment in the Berlin letters about punk rock, which I never would have known about if I hadn't read that whole book. And the reason I had the Western conception of what punk was, I had no idea what it meant behind the wall. Fascinating. So I take all my notes on paper in moleskin notebooks. And in fact, I think the Shadow Moscow had 4 or 5 moleskin notebooks. Berlin Letters had 3. And I read every single page of writing all the way through. I do not organize them. I sometimes put little headers on them. They're a mess. And the reason I have not changed is because as messy as they are, every time I need a specific fact, it's probably a 20 to 30-minute deep dive in these silly notebooks, but everything else gets into the brain and becomes the organic way I think. So I haven't changed it, even though it's the most inefficient way to take notes ever. But I do it by hand, do it in these notebooks. I write at my desk in my office, which I have to tell you, you wouldn't know this, but it saved me during COVID. I have so many friends who are coffee shop writers. They need the hum of people around them. And when COVID hit, so many of my friends were like, I can't write, I can't think. Whereas I've always written in one room, in my office, and I could go there every day. And the minute I walk in those doors, it's time to get to work. It's sort of like I have Pavlovian response of it's work time, not play time, go. So that is where I write. Which means while I'm on the road, nothing's getting done in that way. Yeah.
You've clearly had a lot of fun and great success. How has your writing career changed your life? I'm assuming that you have a whole new group of friends who are authors. I mean, tell us about before and after.
Yeah, that's hard. In the sense that, before it was 15, 14 years ago, my children were young. It was 3 years ago. Life just felt very different. But you're right, now right here, we're afraid that writing probably isn't and has a huge episode to my role in the sense that, yes, the writing fans who know my crazy world because we all live in it. Different groups of them too. I've got all my agency sisters. We have the same agency. We support each other. That's amazing. I've got a couple writer friends and kids every single day. We express all our frustration about what is or is not working that day. And then there is a constant juggle between freedoms and time. And so what that means is I am always working on the last book, which for me would be the Berlin Letters set. I'm still promoting that. I'm still doing talks. I am launching this book, the English Transfer Piece. So I'm right in the midst of trying to ramp up the sales there. And I'm nearing the deadline on this. So there's a difference between a writer and an author. If I could be a writer, that would be better for me. I'm an introvert, love that. But I do have to participate in these other ways. And so it's always this juggling act of what I do on any given day. So it's an interesting, as I was saying earlier, I think no one would be a writer unless had to be. I mean, it's a kind of a crazy career in a crazy world, but writers are compelled, we're hardwired to write. So, yeah, there. Yes. Well, thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh gosh, okay. Do you write longhand or do you write on? Well, that depends. That's a really good question. I write everything on my computer, nothing longhand unless it is a letter or a diary entry. That's the London House was written hand. It is a more emotive, sort of content reading way of writing, and I found that it was far more those interim plus when you're writing a diary entry. So if I'm doing a letter, and the word letters, by the way, it's hard letters in there. To tell me some coding to write them. But those are right by me. Yeah, and Berlin letters. It's also based on the Nona project, the idea of Berkshire. The Nona project ran from 1943 to 1981. A group of extraordinary women who spent all their time breaking the Soviet codes. And it's all based on math, but I figured readers really wouldn't want to approach through math. So I call myself a shit ciphering and a acoustic ciphering. Letters, the Berlin letters do have codes within them. Really, really underwrite. I have all of my rooms. In 1989, there was not AIs. There's no AI used in that book. And oh, yes,
I mean, choose the art.
yeah. Thousands articles in my commerce chosen. And the publisher sends me, they are some, I send them a form about 10 pages long with prompts covering their life and I think that was great. I told them different aspects of the story. For instance, say the English masterpiece, I will send them pictures. So I will see pictures of London. So I can't go back. Let me bring back this. Your sandals. I will send them pictures of there you go. Picasso in London, those kinds of things. But what's really fun, I'll tell you a little story about Berlin letters back here. Here's the cover of the Berlin letters that they sent to me was a picture of the Brandenburg Gate with a crowd in front of it, which was completely unrealistic because the Brandenburg Gate was in the death zone for 28 years. No one was getting near it. But anyway, they have a crowd in front of it, and it had a woman with a sword, knit a gold wash on it. And I made I'll show that. It's like, it could be in the Middle East. With these tones, the scarf do not know that I am in East Germany. So she sent me this cover. And what's the point of this cover? She said, this is the one we rejected. And the woman was wearing a very low cut blouse. She was leaning back against the trap and it was very thoughtful. I was like, it's perfect. But she's a CIA officer. Standard, right? Cross times. She needs business. And there it is. And I love the work because it really does not only fit the 1989 feel of the story, that is exactly what Louisa is wearing. She is a very no-nonsense woman at this moment in her life, and that's how that cover was created. The English masterpiece came to me almost exactly like that. And in fact, the designer did not notice what I think is the best part of it. The painting seemed to create the British cross. And she was like, okay, maybe I did that, but it's brilliant. The only thing I added to that cover, two things. She had Lily's chin resting on the A of masterpiece, and I thought that just looked a little awkward. So I lifted the chin, asked them to do that, and I added a headband to give you that little more 70s feel. That's how that cover came about. So it's very fun. You can take covers that you just did sway over, like the first one, the Berlin letters, or you get covers that you think strike the right note right away. They often do that. It's so funny. The Portuguese edition has humble head, which I think is so fun. But they often do that, and I think the reason they do that is so that you, as the reader, can step into her story, and you can make her what you envisioned her to be. They are, and there was a time, London House has it, where all World War II novels was the woman's back, with a bit of red. And I think that is so we can step into that story. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. It's my table here, and when the book sun and that as we just sign up for it. It's very helpful.
There's a woman she goes to it's the thing. It's this man. So as it's the first thing, so she yeah. Yeah, oh, she doesn't put it. And I was like, shop. No, but look, now it's so I said, really, the boss, I didn't know they were using the science. So, yeah, so like, for the time it's been up to but here's the way it was happening. Love it. That is so and words on the story, stay exists, don't they just need to they she later I was hungry. It helps me people. So that for the salad. So you know she got into jail. The girl she said, "What's Sunday?" Yes, all the teachers are talking. Yeah, so she didn't work. She didn't see. Yes, and that's it's a house. So yeah, so it was amazing. And then her already, and then you have things up in the back, and she confidently said, "What time am I going to?" Right. Yeah. It's not with me, and it's that when you scratch in the place, it's a racist spray, and I have to it's not, I have to, she's a little bit, she's her trust there. But she's tired of system, and she demand one. What do they have? Very good. Well, but I was for that. She didn't know he was. So he was. I mean, very like so. She. What is it? It's not. Has a. But it's yeah, was long. Yeah, I was interesting. Yeah, we can have all these. Still live. So young. It's yeah, actually, it's my option. This is kind of our that's the other issue. That's the way it is. Yeah, you can't relax that stuff. It's lunch. It's lunch. Right. It's all you know. Yeah. So what? So she gets her. She didn't know. Regulate some people are like spouses. And just right. He's really trying to like she first jobs. She's fine. Nice. She's good. Yeah. From she's a froggy. She's like 4 5 this is fine. Christian still better. No, so she has to yeah, work on study. That's why I was should have set up salons and all the like children. So, now, well, maybe I lost it. Somebody gave us stairs out. Let's sign it in. First, So, thank you for staying good. Please,
Yeah. Yeah.
so now, just another year. Radio. Thank you.